Wyoming Territory, 1879. The snow fell hard that March morning, thick and fast, hiding the trail of blood behind her boots. Serina Talbot clutched her baby tighter under her coat, her arms aching, her breath sharp in the cold. The little girl made no sound, only nestled deeper into her chest, warm and small and alive. That was all that mattered. They were alive. For now, she stumbled through the trees, boots slipping on packed snow, heart thudding with fear. She had not stopped running since last night, when the shouting started and the bottle broke against the hearth. She had waited until he passed out, whiskey heavy on his breath, rage still hot in his fists, and then she ran. Out the back door, baby in arms, into the freezing dark. Now it was daylight, and she was far from the house, but not far enough. He would wake up eventually. He would come looking. The baby stirred, a soft sigh against her collarbone. "Shiloh, stay with me," Serina whispered, her voice cracking. Just a little farther. Her legs gave out then, folding beneath her as the ground tilted. Her knees hit hard. She landed sideways in the snow, shielding the baby with her arms. Her vision spun. She tried to push herself up, but her limbs would not work. She was too cold, too tired, a horse snorted nearby. She barely had time to lift her head before a shadow loomed over her. A rider dismounted, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a thick coat and a scarf pulled up against the wind. Snow clung to his hat brim. His boots stopped inches from her face. "Ma'am," his voice was deep, edged with concern. Serina blinked, trying to focus. The man crouched beside her, his gloved hand gentle on her shoulder. She flinched. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said quickly. "You're freezing." "Let me help, please," she gasped. "My baby." He peeled back her coat and saw the bundled child. A look passed over his face, shock, then something softer. He reached down without hesitation. Serina tried to hold on, but her arms trembled too hard. "I got her," he said. "You both need warmth. My cabin's close." She watched him lift Shiloh with surprising care, tucking the baby inside his coat. Then he bent and picked Serina up like she weighed nothing. The last thing she saw before passing out was the snow swirling around his boots as he carried them both away. Warmth woke her. She blinked slowly, her lashes heavy with sleep. The room was dim but golden with firelight. She was lying on a cot near a stone hearth, wrapped in blankets. Her dress was gone, replaced with a dry flannel shirt that hung loose on her. The air smelled like coffee and smoke. Panic shot through her. "Shiloh," she whispered, bolting upright. A soft sound came from across the room. The cowboy was there, sitting in a wooden chair with the baby in his lap, bottle in hand. He looked up. "She's all right," he said. "Took some coaxing to get her to feed, but she's warm now." "Slept a bit." Serina's breath caught. She stared at him. He had taken off his coat and hat. His hair was dark, a little too long, curling slightly at the ends. He looked young, maybe mid-20s, with a strong jaw and kind eyes. Thank you," she croaked. He stood slowly, cradling the baby. "You passed out. Thought you might have froze to death if I had not come along when I did. Name's Waylin Zeke. This here's my place." He walked over and handed Shiloh to her. Serina clutched her daughter close, burying her face in the child's soft hair. "I'm Serina," she said. "Serina Talbot." "And this is Shiloh," he nodded. "You got a husband out there looking for you." She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, not anymore." He did not press. He walked back to the chair, picking up a mug and sipping from it, watching the fire. Serina sat quietly, rocking Shiloh. It was warm here, safe. Her limbs still ached, but her heart had slowed. The silence between them was not heavy, it felt steady. Waylin looked over at her again after a while. "You need anything? Food? I got some stew on the stove." Yes," she said. "Please. If it's no trouble." He nodded and stood, moving around the small kitchen space, ladling stew into a tin bowl. He handed it to her with a spoon, his fingers brushing hers. She looked up at him, and their eyes met. There was no pity there, just quiet understanding. She ate slowly, the warmth spreading through her chest. Shiloh slept against her shoulder. After a while, she asked, "Why did you help me?" Waylin sat down again. He stared at the fire for a long moment before answering. "My mother ran once," he said, "when I was a boy. Took me and my sister far from a man who liked to raise his fists more than his voice. We barely made it. A stranger helped us too, gave us a barn to sleep in, food, safety. I reckon I owe that back." Serina swallowed hard. "She's lucky to have you," she said. Waylin glanced at Shiloh. She's lucky to have you. A silence settled, warmer this time. That night, Serina lay on the cot, eyes open, listening to the wind against the cabin walls. Waylin had offered to sleep on the floor, but she had insisted he take the bed. He had not argued, just laid out a blanket near the fire. She could hear Shiloh's steady breathing beside her, and across the room, Waylin's slow, even breaths. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She had run with nothing. No money, no food, no plan, just fear and love and the will to survive, but tonight, she was safe. And for the first time in years, she believed maybe kindness still existed in the world. She turned her head toward the soft glow of the fire and toward the man asleep beside it, Waylin Zeke. She whispered his name in the dark like a promise. The wind had dulled by morning, leaving behind a hush that clung to the pines and frost-laced earth outside the cabin. Inside, the fire had burned down to a bed of glowing coals. Serina woke slowly, her muscles sore, her mind clearer than it had been in days. Shiloh stirred beside her, cheeks pink from warmth and sleep. The scent of rye toast and wood smoke drifted through the air. Waylin stood by the stove, sleeves rolled and hair damp from snowmelt. He looked over when she sat up but said nothing at first, just nodded once and turned back to his pan. She ran a hand over Shiloh's curls, then stood carefully, adjusting the shirt he had lent her. It hung nearly to her knees, the sleeves rolled to her elbows. She rubbed her arms, not from cold but out of uncertainty. Her feet touched the smooth wood floor, and she realized how strange it was to stand without fear bracing her spine. "You sleep all right?" Waylin asked without turning. "I didn't expect to," she said softly. "But I did." He slid a piece of toast onto a tin plate, then added scrambled eggs beside it. "There's a basin on the shelf yonder," he said, "if you want to wash up." She nodded and stepped to the corner where a clean rag and enamel basin waited. The water was cold, but she welcomed it. She scrubbed the grime from her cheeks, the dried blood from a split below her hairline. Her reflection in the darkened window caught her off guard, older than she remembered, with shadows deep under her eyes. By the time she turned, Waylin had placed 2 plates on the table and added a third, smaller one with some mashed egg. He glanced at the child and then back at her. "She eats soft food yet, if I mash it fine," Serina said. "She likes eggs." They sat at the rough-hewn table. Shiloh nestled in Serina's lap, her tiny fingers curling around the edge of the plate as she nibbled. The room was quiet but not strained, just 2 people figuring out how to sit across from each other after the storm. Waylin didn't fill the silence. He just ate, slow and steady, eyes on the snow beyond the window. When Serina finally spoke, her voice had settled into something firm. "I'll need work, something I can do with Shiloh near." He chewed a moment, then swallowed. "There's a widow down by the river, keeps bees and runs a stillroom. Herb salves and such, might need help come spring thaw." Serina nodded, grateful. "I can sew too. You know anyone round here who needs mending?" "Old man Harold's always tearing something," Waylin said. "Mostly his coat, sometimes his pride." That pulled a laugh from her, brief but real. Waylin looked at her, then not just a glance, but a long, measuring look that didn't carry judgment. "You got folks anywhere?" "My brother died in Kansas," she said. "No one else left." He nodded once and stood, carrying the empty plates to the wash basin. "I'll ride into town tomorrow, get you some better clothes. That shirt's mine from 5 years ago. Reckon it's seen better days." "I can't pay you," she said. "I didn't ask for that," he replied. She watched his hands scrub the dishes clean. They were strong, weathered, and moved without hesitation. "You live out here alone?" she asked. "Most days," he said. "Just me and these trees." He turned to dry the plates, voice still even. "Tried ranch work for a while, didn't sit right. Folks talk too much. Out here, things stay quiet, honest." Serina shifted Shiloh to her shoulder. "I used to think quiet was dangerous." Waylin set the plates down and leaned his hands on the counter. "Sometimes it is. Other times it's the only way a person can hear themselves think." Shiloh let out a soft coo and reached a hand toward the chair beside her. Waylin pulled it closer without a word, and Serina laid the baby down on the cushion. She stayed asleep, one hand curled into a fist, lashes dark against her cheeks. Serina stood slowly and faced him again. "I know I can't stay forever." Waylin met her gaze. "No one said you had to leave." She didn't answer right away. She stepped to the window and looked outside. The snow had stopped, and the pine needles glistened in the pale morning sun. A deer trail cut across the clearing, leading into the woods. "I don't know what I'm supposed to be," she said, "now that I'm not afraid." Waylin walked over and stood beside her, not too close. His voice was quiet. "Maybe you ain't supposed to be anything yet. Just be here, for now." She turned toward him, searching his face. "I don't trust easy," she said. "Don't expect you to." He didn't reach for her, didn't make promises, but he stood beside her like it meant something. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone, not in the way that echoed. She looked back out at the trees, hand resting lightly on the window frame, and she stayed there with him, just standing, just breathing. The sun held longer now, stretching its fingers past the ridge and into the narrow clearing behind the cabin. Ice still clung stubbornly to the creek's edge, but the air had softened enough to carry the scent of thawing pine and wet bark. Serina stood out back, sleeves rolled, scrubbing Waylin's shirt clean in the stream using a flat stone and lye soap. Her fingers were red from the cold water, but she worked without pause, jaw set, the rhythm steady. Waylin crouched nearby, mending a broken rail on the corral fence. His hammer struck slow and sure, the nails biting into weathered wood with each swing. He didn't speak much while he worked, but Serina had come to understand the quiet between them wasn't distance, it was the space to breathe. Shiloh sat bundled on a blanket beneath a leaning pine, gumming a strip of dried apple that Waylin had cut for her that morning. She babbled softly to herself, content to watch the movement of light through the branches. "You always build fences this careful?" Serina asked, wringing the shirt and laying it across a flat rock. Waylin looked up, brushing sawdust from his sleeve. "Only when I don't want the mule breaking out again. Last time he wandered near the ravine, had me chasing after him half the morning. You caught him. Not before he backed into a wasp nest." Serina laughed, short and sudden, and Waylin's eyes lingered on her a moment longer than they had before. She didn't notice she was already reaching for the next shirt, her hands moving with brisk purpose. "You ever think of selling the mule?" she asked. "He came with the land," Waylin said. "Figured that made him part of the place." She sat back on her heels and looked toward the hills. "What made you buy this land?" He straightened slowly, setting the hammer down. "Didn't buy it, traded for it. Helped an old trapper get his wife out to her sister in Medicine Bow. He said he was too tired to see another winter here, left me the deed." Serina's brows lifted. "And you just stayed," he shrugged. "Felt like a place a man could think without someone trying to fix him." She looked over at Shiloh, who had now discovered a pine cone and was inspecting it like a rare treasure. "I used to think stillness meant something was waiting to go wrong. And now, I'm not sure yet." Waylin nodded once, then picked up the hammer again. "You don't have to know everything right away." That night, after Shiloh had fallen asleep wrapped in her quilt, Serina stood by the hearth, combing her damp hair with the horn comb Waylin had left on the shelf without a word. She wore the new cotton dress he'd brought back from town, plain and blue with a faded hem. It fit better than she expected. Waylin sat at the table, carving a spoon from a piece of juniper. The room smelled of the wood's sharp oils and the rabbit stew they'd eaten hours before. "Where'd you learn to carve like that?" she asked. "My grandmother," he said. "She was Apache, lived west of Fort Defiance. She'd sit me down with a pocket knife and a hunk of wood anytime I started fidgeting. You still see her. She died before I left Arizona." "Fever took her." Serina set the comb down. "She must have been strong." "She was," he said. Then, after a pause, "You remind me of her, not in how you talk, just the way you hold yourself." Serina turned toward him, hands still at her sides. "I don't feel strong most days. Doesn't change the fact you are." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It filled every inch of the cabin with something quiet and growing. She crossed the room slowly and sat across from him. Her hands lay folded in her lap, but her eyes didn't waver. "I don't know what you expect from me, Waylin." "I don't expect anything," he said. "You're here, that's enough." "I keep waiting to feel safe," she murmured, "like I can stop running." "You already stopped," he said. "You just haven't noticed yet." She looked away, blinking once, then leaned back in the chair, letting her shoulders settle deeper than she had in years. Waylin set the half-carved spoon down and stood to stir the coals. The fire flared gently, casting a golden light across the wooden walls. When he returned to the table, he didn't sit. He stood beside her, quiet, waiting. Serina tilted her face up, and when she saw he wasn't reaching for her, just waiting to see if she wanted to close the distance, something in her chest loosened. She stood too, slowly, carefully. Their hands brushed. "I'm not ready for everything," she said. "I'm not asking for everything," he replied. She met his gaze. "But maybe something." His voice was low. "Yeah, maybe something." And for once, the stillness didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a beginning. By late April, the road into town had turned to thick, rutted mud, and the air carried the wet promise of planting. Waylin's cabin sat in a hush between melt and bloom, the ground softening underfoot, sap rising in the trees. Serina stood at the edge of the clearing, her skirt hem damp, a basket looped over one arm, her eyes on the rows of early greens beginning to push through the thawed earth. Waylin knelt in the soft soil, sleeves rolled, coaxing bean seeds into a shallow furrow. His hands were dark with dirt, and he moved with a kind of ease that made her chest tighten. "What made you plant beans?" she asked, adjusting the shawl around her shoulders. He looked up, brushing a streak of soil across his cheek without noticing. "They climb, reach for something." Seemed right. Serina crouched beside him, setting her basket down. "My mother used to say you could judge a household by its garden, said stingy folks plant all root vegetables." Waylin handed her a small cloth bundle of corn kernels. "And what do beans say?" "They say someone expects to be here a while," she said, voice low. He didn't answer. Just pressed another seed into the dirt, slow and deliberate. She planted beside him, the sun warming the back of her neck. A hawk circled overhead, casting a slow shadow across the field. Shiloh slept nearby beneath a makeshift linen canopy stretched between two fence posts, her breath soft and steady. After a while, Waylin leaned back on his heels. "That widow you were going to help Frances, she came by while you were in the hills last week, left a jar of salve and said you could start next month if you were ready." Serina brushed soil from her palms. "I'll go." "It'll give us something steadier." He nodded, but there was something in the set of his jaw that made her pause. "You don't want me to?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." He stood and dusted off his trousers. "It's not about want, you need roots." "I get that." Serina rose too, watching his face. "Then what is it?" He hesitated, then looked past her toward the ridge line. "I just got used to hearing your voice in the mornings." Her breath caught, not from his words, but from the way he said them like he hadn't meant to. She stepped closer, not touching him, just standing in his space. "I don't plan on leaving." He didn't meet her eyes, but his shoulders eased. That evening the rain came quiet and steady. They stayed inside, the cabin dim except for the oil lamp on the table and the glow of the fire. Shiloh lay in her crib, a soft wool blanket tucked to her chin, her tiny hand curled around the edge. Waylin sat sharpening the drawknife, his motions careful. The scent of oiled steel drifted faintly through the room. Serina stitched at a torn feed sack, her needle moving in small, precise arcs. The silence between them had changed, not empty, but full of something waiting. "I never asked," she said, setting her thread aside, "what you'd be doing if you weren't here." Waylin leaned back in his chair. "Might have joined that cattle drive heading toward Idaho last fall. They needed men. But the land was already under my boots, and I figured I'd rather build than drift. You ever think about leaving it, sometimes?" He looked toward the window where rain streaked the pane. "But then I remember I never heard birdsong in the cities. Never saw the stars right." Serina folded the sack neatly. "You're not like the men I knew. I take that as it's meant." She moved to the fire, holding her hands toward the warmth. "Shiloh started looking for me when I leave the room. Like she knows I'll always come back. She's learning what steady feels like." Serina turned. "And you, what about me? Are you learning it too?" Waylin stood slowly. "I was just surviving before, then you showed up with a whole world in your arms." She didn't speak. She just watched him cross the room, stopping only when they were eye to eye. "If I asked you to stay," he said, voice barely above the crackle of flame, "not because you have nowhere else, but because you want to, what would you say?" Serina looked down, then back up. Her hand lifted, not to touch his face, but to rest just over his heart. "I'd say I already did." He didn't move, didn't reach for her, not right away. But his breath deepened. And when she finally stepped closer, his arms came around her like he'd been holding the shape of her absence for too long. Outside, the rain softened the earth. Inside, the silence held something new, no longer waiting, but found. By the second week of May, the ground had hardened underfoot, and the first shoots of wild chokecherry bloomed along the ridge. The mornings carried the scent of damp bark and new grass, and the nights had shed their sharp edge. One morning before sunrise, Serina woke to the sound of Shiloh murmuring softly in her crib, not crying, just testing her voice against the quiet. She rose and wrapped her shawl over her shoulders, brushing her fingers gently over the child's curls before stepping outside. The sky was still deep blue, touched with the faintest silver near the horizon. Waylin stood by the shed, cinching the last strap on a pack mule. His movements were slow, practiced. When he saw her, he gave a quiet nod and continued tying the last knot. "You're leaving?" she asked, voice low to keep from waking Shiloh fully. He shook his head. "Just riding out to check the north fence line. Found some prints yesterday. Cougar, I think. Better I see to it before it gets bold." She stepped closer, arms folded against the chill. "You'll be back before nightfall, before dinner, if all's quiet." She looked over the saddle bags. "You packed more than jerky." He paused. "Thought I might stop by the river on the way back. Frances said she's got a new tincture she wants your eye on." Serina smiled faintly. "So you're running errands. That and maybe trading for one of her willow baskets. Yours is starting to fray." She reached out and touched the hem of his coat. "You worry over small things like they're sacred. I figure small things are what make a place feel like home." He didn't kiss her, had never tried without invitation, but there was something in the way he looked at her, clear and steady, that made her heart ache in a way that felt good. As he mounted, she stepped back and said, "Ride careful." He tipped his hat once and turned the mule down the trail, his silhouette folding into the trees. She spent the day cleaning out the root cellar, sorting through last year's preserved goods, lifting each jar to the light to check for seal and spoil. Shiloh crawled along the packed dirt floor beside her, chasing a ribbon Serina tied to a button. In the afternoon, she hung laundered linens on the line and watched the sun warm the pale cotton dry. Waylin returned just after dusk, his boots caked with red mud and a small bundle of willow tucked under one arm. He smelled of pine smoke and river air. As he stepped into the cabin, he handed her a folded scrap of cloth. "I brought you something," he said. Inside was a small carved rattle, round and smooth, with two holes where tiny seeds rattled inside. "You made this," she said quietly. I thought she might be ready for one. "She's been reaching for everything lately." Serina turned the rattle in her hands, then crouched to offer it to Shiloh, who grasped it eagerly and shook it with wide eyes. "She likes it," Serina said, rising. Waylin hung his coat near the door. "I saw a patch of wild sorrel near the river. Could dig it up, transplant it near the porch. You might use it in your teas." She stepped closer. "You're always thinking ahead," he shrugged. "You don't build a life by accident." She looked at him for a long moment, then reached up and touched the side of his face. "You've done more than build a life, Waylin. You gave us one." He covered her hand with his, calloused and warm. "I just gave you space to breathe. You filled the rest." That night, after Shiloh had gone quiet, they sat beside the hearth. The fire was low, the lamp trimmed. Serina rested her head against Waylin's shoulder, her hand loosely curled in his. Neither spoke for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was steady. "I was married once. You never asked. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." He wasn't kind. "I stayed longer than I should have, not because I loved him, because I was afraid of what came after." Waylin didn't move or speak. He just listened. "I used to think surviving was the best I could do," she continued. "But now I want more than that. I want mornings where I wake up knowing I'm safe. I want to plant things and watch them grow. I want Shiloh to have more than memory and shelter." Waylin turned toward her then. "And what do you want from me?" She looked up into his eyes. "Everything you already give." He pulled her close then, not with urgency, but with quiet certainty. His lips met hers, and the room around them held its breath. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I want to stay here," she said. "You already have," he whispered. They built the rest of their lives from that moment forward, slow, deliberate, full of grace. Serina began helping Frances with the stillroom. walking down the trail every few days with Shiloh bundled against her chest. Waylin expanded the garden, added a henhouse, and taught Shiloh to walk by letting her stumble through rows of potatoes and beans. They were married in early fall, a quiet vow spoken under the changing aspens with Frances and her brother as witnesses, and Shiloh cradled in Waylin's arms. Serina wore a dress she had sewn herself, and Waylin gave her a ring carved from juniper, the grain smooth from hours of shaping. The cabin grew fuller with time shelves lined with Frances's tinctures and Serina's sewing, Shiloh's laughter echoing through the rooms, Waylin's boots always left by the door. They never built walls between them, only bridges. They never spoke of the past unless it was to honor the road that led them here. And they never once forgot how hard one piece could be. As the years stretched forward, the land held them gently a place not just to survive, but to live truly and wholly together. Always.